All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Angelo Carlos podcast. I'm here with my guest, Ben. Ben is actually a FAANG employee turned YC employee, one of the best and smartest kind of engineers and technical people I've met, as well as one of the most best business minds I've met at UCLA Anderson. Super honored to have Ben as a guest. Ben's went to Cal Poly Slow, worked at companies like Microsoft, Uber, as well as Netflix. So he hit the whole big tech sector. Now he is at VELT, working on a YC company, which is a Y. For those of you who are curious, Y Combinator, one of the best accelerators, one of the best kind of programs. A lot of big companies like Coinbase, like Stripe, they've all come from YC, and now Ben is a part of VELT. So we're super excited to have him on board and kind of just learn a bit more about Ben, his career, and Ben, welcome to the podcast, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Angelo. I'm really excited to be here. This is actually the first podcast I've ever done, so
Oh,
it's a first
really?
for me.
Sir, it is an honor. Thank you so much that you picked me, bro. That's awesome. So, we're gonna actually go into your career. I just want to just dive in right now. Ben's resume is super fascinating. He's worked on so many great projects and programs. But can you tell us, Ben, like where did you go to undergrad and what was your major there?
Sure. So I went to Cal Poly Slow for my undergrad, and initially I started off as an electrical engineering major, but 2 years in I switched to computer engineering because some of the upperclassmen said that was where the future was headed. And along the way, I thought that maybe I made a mistake because I was behind the other computer science students. So I actually switched my major back to electrical engineering, but then somehow I got a job as a program manager at Microsoft. So
Oh, wow.
I just graduated with a computer engineering degree and went off into the workforce.
You know, it's pretty crazy. I've had friends who just graduated from Stanford, and then they were getting jobs as program managers at Microsoft as well out in Redmond. They say they learned a ton out there in Microsoft. Were you locally? Were you local in Redmond, or were you in the kind of Bay Area office?
I was in Redmond.
And how was Redmond? How was that culture like? I'm assuming the CEO. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the CEO. Who is the CEO again for Microsoft?
Satya Nadella.
Yeah, was Satya the CEO at that time?
Yeah, so I actually interned there my junior year of college, and that was the first year Satya took over. So there was a lot of excitement about how he was going to change things. There were some, bad parts of the old Microsoft culture, like stack ranking and just kind of a boring old corporate culture that
Mm.
people, they were really looking forward to a refresh with Satya.
Yeah, that's exciting, and it's kind of crazy to see how great of a leader Satya has become since kind of taking the helm of Microsoft, especially with the acquisition of course, of OpenAI and ChatGPT. Not acquisition, more so the partnership with them. So it's kind of really cool to see you kind of being on the early days of Satya as leader and just seeing things shake up. What did you do at Microsoft during your time there?
Yeah, so I joined a new group that was being formed, and I didn't know what team I was joining. I just signed up for an internship. They said I was joining some group under sales and marketing. I had no clue, but it was this new division that was created to create online training courses on Microsoft products, Microsoft technologies, and
Mm.
I was hired to essentially stand in front of a camera and make videos showing how cool Microsoft technologies are. So I would, stand with the laptop, I would code demos. We
Oh,
had a
wow.
whole like $1 million studio and like an actual film editing team to support us. So I just kind of was there to entertain and create make some cool demos. And that was a lot of fun for a first job.
That's so cool, man. What was that like? Did you kind of for teams usually, I know most people at Google, it would be like team match. You kind of just on a random team, whatever team wants to pick you up, you join that team. Was that similar for Microsoft where you kind of have that team matching process and you're just like, all right, good luck. This is the team you got.
Um, Sort of. So the story was I applied and then I did the first round interview, but then I got an email saying, "Oh, sorry, we ran out of spots.
Oh,
Maybe
wow.
we'll get in touch next year." So then I was like, "Okay." Um, then I went. That's when I kind of like almost gave up and like I decided to almost join like a semiconductor company. But then a couple months later in like May, and most internships like happen in the fall, so May is really late.
Mhm.
I just got an email saying, "Oh, a spot opened up in this new team." Do you want to fly in for an interview? And then, so yeah, I took the chance, and then that's how I got matched with this team. It was just a spot opened up last minute because the team was being formed around that time.
That's so cool. Any kind of key insights you learned during your time at Microsoft? Most people, it's kind of hard to get into big tech, especially right out of undergrad. What did you kind of learn during your time there?
Let's see. What did I learn on my time at Microsoft? I think Satya would say something. He said something really important that kind of stays with me. If he said to think about, people always ask like, what can the company, what can what can you do for the company? But sometimes it's good to ask, what can the company do for you in your career?
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so like when you're deciding what the work you're doing, you can always just blindly follow what your manager gives you. But if you
Hmm.
think about your own career and where you want to go, sometimes you need to proactively pick projects that will help you, and put things that you don't really want to do. You kind of figure out ways to, you know, let's say push them to the side and give you more time to focus on what you want to do. And at a big company, if you navigate things well, you can probably get that to happen.
I completely agree with you. I remember at Cloud, most people, Google Cloud, most people were always fighting for the high impact projects because it was one, tremendous amount of growth, two, they get a lot of senior leadership look on it, and then three, it looks great for performance reviews and promotions because you're working on the highest impact projects. And it seems like you did that during your time at Microsoft, asking what the company could do for you in your career. And I kind of seen how you've done that with the way you've approached your career after Microsoft. So after Microsoft, I believe you moved on over to Uber, correct?
Yeah, so Microsoft was a great company, but at large corporations, sometimes a new vice president takes over and they look at what's on their plate and they say, why does
Hmm.
this division exist? And if the current leaders don't give an answer that the new vice president likes, they may just destroy the entire division. So that's what happened. We got a new vice president. They didn't really see why our team existed. There are other teams at Microsoft kind of doing the same thing. So they basically cut the team in half. And although I didn't get cut, I kind of saw that there may be further cuts in the future. So I was like, okay, I better
Mm,
get out now. Um, and I had the experience at a large, really large, one of the older tech companies. I kind of wanted to see what are the younger startups like. So I saw a role at Uber that I thought fit my experience really well, and I thought, okay, Uber sounds pretty cool. It was pre-IPO.
yeah,
Their CEO just got kicked out, and then they brought in a new one. So it was, also a new exciting time.
that is
Um,
exciting.
yeah, so then I joined.
Yeah, old T, that was Travis, right?
Yeah, Travis is the one who got kicked out.
Yeah, and he was also a UCLA guy too, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I get,
So
yeah,
just hold it down for the Bruins.
Bruins.
And
Yeah,
then, can you talk about what it was like working at pre-IPO? We've had a guest before who've worked at Poshmark as well as Bill.com, kind of some pre-IPO companies, and seen the company go through IPO and how hypergrowth was like prior to the IPO. What was your experience at Uber for our viewers?
yeah. It was. They like to call it like controlled chaos. Things were
Hmm.
moving really fast. I remember one day, one of the managers called me over and said, "Look," and told me to look at the dashboard of their growth. And he said, "You see this last 3 months growth? That's one lift. So we grew one
Wow.
lift in 3 months. So like things are going really fast, and people were trying to figure out like processes to manage the growth so that headcount can only grow so fast, but if there's ways to manage the growth without headcount, then they're trying to figure out ways to put that in place. And none of them always works, and it sometimes like things just seem very unorganized.
No, and I agree with you. Similar to me, I worked at Google X before, and I saw what it was. And Google X is like the research division of Google, so kind of like the Waymos of the startup companies of Alphabet. So I've seen what hypergrowth was like, where there's no procedures, processes. You just got to figure it out, and that's very hard to do, especially when everyone is just trying to do a good job, but you don't know what to do. There's so many things. There's so many things that are on fire, basically. So I completely understand what that was like, working there. And then were you able to basically? Can you talk about what you actually did for Uber, Ben?
Yeah, so since I did kind of like creating online training courses at Microsoft, there was a role at Uber on their onboarding team that would train all the new engineers that joined. So the role
Mm,
was to um, create a bunch of training material and then give that material to kind of like the more senior engineers and have those senior engineers teach the material because Uber was like a global company that had an
yeah.
offices in like SF, Seattle, Amsterdam, India. So you can't just hire one person to teach everything. We had to kind of train people at each remote site to become like an instructor, and then they would onboard the people who joined their site. So it was a bunch of creating like a bunch of training material and teaching the engineers how to teach, and that's not their day job to teach their engineers. And then making sure all the curriculum gets updated and we're teaching the latest stuff because a lot of the training is on internal tooling that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Oh, that's so fascinating. Because what were you guys teaching them with regards to internal tooling? Because I think a lot of times most big tech companies, right, you are subject to a lot of the internal tooling, right? You can't really take what you have there to another company. What types of things were you teaching with internal tooling? Was it just like the tech stack? What was going on there?
Yeah, we were explaining the microservice architecture. We were explaining like why we came up with this architecture and how it was kind of it enabled each person to own their own microservice so that it was easier to break things apart and have people work at the same time. We talked about like if you want to like spin up a database, you go to this database team's product and you can use that internally. Um, there were there was like this thing where you could see every Uber car driving around. So yeah, it's like a lot of internal tools. That people would need just to do their J job. Just like how do you publish code, put it on, deploy it, have it live.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's good you guys had that. I've noticed during my stints at Meta, as well as at Google, was that most the internal tooling was actually very good, and there's always a place for documentation. Like at Google, we had something called MoMA, and that's where all the intro documentation was housed. Similar at Meta, where everything was housed kind of like on a feed. So I've noticed that for these companies to reach kind of hyper growth at a lot of scale, it's they need to have the internal tooling. So when engineers do leave and go to another Silicon Valley company, they'll
Mhm.
have something. And it's good to know Uber was doing that kind of so early, in their hyper growth stage, especially as like one of the darlings of Silicon Valley. That's pretty cool, Ben. So I want to kind of go in now to your MBA. Like, what made you decide you wanted to go to the MBA? Most people who are highly technical, they kind of just stay in the valley, get their bachelor's, and they just kind of get promoted out to the ranks. I've had VPs at Google who are super technical and they just had a bachelor's. Why did you want to come back?
Yeah, I guess some people say like the first job you get, you kind of get siloed into that role for the next role and the next role. So that's kind of what happened to me. I started off in basically training, and then all the roles that I was qualified for were other basically training roles.
Hmm.
So I kind of wanted to do the MBA so I could broaden my skill set, have a chance to hit reset and go after other roles. I was interested in product management, but also I wanted to learn in general, like how do I know how to build things from my engineering background, but how do you actually sell and market things? And I wanted
That's
to learn that from
fascinating.
the professors and my classmates.
That's pretty cool. You mentioned that. We actually interviewed Yuna about 2 weeks ago, and you probably know Yuna from our classes, but she's a staff product manager at Qualcomm, and her reasoning was similar to you. Was that she was very good engineering wise and technical wise when it came to the actual product itself and working with engineering teams, but she wanted to learn more so on the business side. That's why she went to get back to MBA, and it's pretty interesting to hear that, right? Most people, it's the other way around. They want to become get into investment banking or that route, but it's always good to see people who are in technology understanding that if I know technology, if I know business, I have a really very niche skill set and I can excel in my role and in what you do. So it's nice to hear that. Any key things you've learned from the MBA so far at UCLA?
Yeah, let me think about that. Yeah, before UCLA, I didn't know anything about finance. Uh, I didn't know squat. So.
like
Now I
accounting, all that
understand, like,
stuff.
yeah, I didn't understand any of these quarterly calls at all these like tech companies I'm at. I just didn't understand anything. So you
Hmm.
see, like, give me a solid idea, like, what do these financial terms mean? How to, like, if you're, if you're at a company and you want to grow it, which area you should be focusing on, and just like understanding finance. And you need money to grow things. So if you can borrow money, you can accelerate your growth, but you need to be able to borrow it at a good rate. And sometimes you can borrow something at a high rate, and then borrow some more money later to pay it off, and then have it at a lower rate. So it's all these tricks that these finance people know how to just to keep the money in the company and make sure you don't go bankrupt.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's so fascinating. You mentioned that all these finance tips and hacks, and then you actually learning to read like the quarterly reports, annual reports that are coming from the finance team. I think that's why it's so fascinating. A lot of people in big tech or in tech, you've probably seen this, come from the investment banking background. They come from the consulting background, or they come from like a big strategy background because they understand how money works and how to grow a company. I've had one of my mentors always tell me, like, Angelo, this company can grow with all the best technology, we can have the best engineers, but if you don't know how to do sales, if you don't know how to do marketing, why would the business grow itself? So always good to know that there is a business aspect to a technology company. So that is pretty cool. So after kind of this phase in your life, you kind of moved on over to Netflix, and you kind of get into that FAANG, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. And Netflix is one of the most interesting companies in the Valley, in the sense that they only hire senior people, or at least I know for the engineering side, they only hire senior engineers, and they pay a lot. I think it's like $500,000 a year in just either salary or stock, whatever you kind of pick. And you are a senior TPM at Netflix, so senior technical program manager. What did you do there at Netflix, and what was the culture like?
Yeah. So I also joined the what they call the developer education team. So kind of
Mm-hmm.
leveraging my background doing training at Uber and also like online training at Microsoft. Netflix was hiring like really fast. They were hiring
Really?
dozens of engineers every week. So there was a big need to onboard them as soon as possible. Like you said, they get paid $500,000. If they're sitting there for a month, that's like you just lost 50K there. So
Yeah.
we want to be able to train them on our internal tools so they can use all their skills and build Netflix.com bigger and better and faster.
And what was that like working at Netflix? You're kind of in that hyper growth phase, kind of out in Los Gatos. What was that like for you? What did you kind of do on a day-to-day basis with your team?
Yeah, so what was really cool about Netflix is they gave every person kind of the freedom to do whatever it takes to get to a solution.
Mm-hmm.
So although I was on the training team, I didn't, I could think about ways to, create training at scale. Um, so I actually leveraged my like coding background, and I built some like internal apps that
Oh wow.
the engineers would use on their, when they first joined to kind of discover resources. You can link someone a Google Docs with like a million links, but that's just
No one's
links
gonna
going
open
to
it.
more links and more links. So I kind
Yeah.
of try to make like this learning portal that people it could like based on your role, it would figure out where all the important resources and just show you. So I was given the freedom to do that. Like most companies would say, like you're not an engineer, Ben, go do project management stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But Netflix is like, oh, okay, we hired you to solve the problem. Do it the way you think it should be done. And I love that freedom.
That's awesome. I know like some of the best people I've worked with were also highly technical, and they didn't just have a project management background, right? The ones who I did work with could code. They could understand how like a data center worked. They could understand like what was like the engineer going through in the engineer's mind. So it's really cool that you were able to do that and take advantage, take initiative. What do you recommend for our viewers who are in their career and they see a problem or initiative? Do you suggest that they kind of go on and build a solution to that, similar to what you did in Netflix, to kind of help out the company, help out the business?
I would say it's important to talk to people who are involved in that general area to get their idea, talk to them what you're going to do, because someone may have tried what you've done in the past and failed.
Hmm.
That doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't do it, but it's good to learn from people who kind of been there and seen what's been done, so that could help you make a better idea in the future. There's going to be people who tell you not to do it because they've had bad experiences, but in the end, I think you should, if you have a gut feeling about something, you should go and do it. And then if you make it succeed, no one's going to be mad that it was like outside of your scope. But if you do, there is a risk that, it does not succeed, and then you wasted 6 months building something that didn't work. And then, that may reflect poorly, but I think life's about taking the risks, and that's what makes it exciting.
I love it, man. That's beautiful. Life is about taking the risks. And then you kind of mentioned, hey, cover your ground a bit. Ask senior leadership, ask your manager, is this something I should be working on? Is this something I should prioritize? And if so, should I build that? I made kind of a podcast episode about having one-on-ones with your manager and how you should break down whether or not telling them what you're working on, which is priority, and do you need help with things? Should I innovate? Should I build something to kind of assist with it? So I love kind of how you bring that up. Really just try and search for innovation, but also make sure it's cleared with senior management and your leadership, especially if you're going to take 6 months to build it, man. That's a lot of, that's $250,000 for an engineer, right? So that's a lot of money. But yeah, so last question about Netflix, you were there for quite some time, I think about 3 years, you said. Any advice for our viewers on how to do well at a big tech company? Because you got a lot of performance reviews each of those 3 years. What advice do you have for our viewers to excel and do well during their time frame at big tech?
Yeah, definitely. There's some useful tips I actually learned at UCLA in the current class I'm taking. So I'm
Yeah,
taking this class, and it's talking about, how do you build your power within a company? And at first it's like, oh, ew, power. This is for,
yeah,
people who,
ew,
all
Silicon Valley,
corporate,
right?
politics. But the professor actually said, if you're not actually, if you're not actively working on your own power, then someone else isn't going to get power over you and make your life miserable. So you should work on your own power, because that, that allows you to at least help the people you want to help.
That's
Um,
awesome. Continue.
yeah, so like ways you can build your own power, like, there's the more obvious ones, like just be good at what you do, expertise. Um, Another surprising one is just being likable at the company. So there's things you can do to be likable, like remember people's names, smile, say hello. Those can go a long way. And then there's other ones such as, working on something visible, or working on something that has a lot of impact that affects people. If you're working on like an unknown tool, and that no one touches, you have less power. Um, so it's kind of like figuring out ways where you can, increase your power. And then one of the best ways is empowering others. If you help someone else, like a junior engineer, get promoted, they're gonna, they're always gonna have your back, because they'll remember that.
Oh, Ben, that was awesome, man. That's such a great answer. I completely agree with everything you said with regards to kind of exonerating and showing your power, right? I remember at Google, we had someone go from L4 to L6 in like a year and a half, which is really fast, right? And they did exactly what you did, which is show you kind of flex your power, right? One, they're very likable. Two, they really marketed themselves and showed off their projects, their programs. And three, they're just very, very good at their job, right? So they hit all three of these buckets that you're kind of talking about, and they were able to get promoted so fast. And that's kind of like what you're kind of showing how you did so good so well at Netflix. So I appreciate you kind of talking about that. It's so kind of it's not told by a lot of people whenever you start working at these big tech companies, all these little hacks that there is a corporate kind of politics going on where you have to really flex your power and show you're a great fit for the company. So I appreciate you talking about that, man. um, I want to jump in now to working at the YC company VELT. What do you guys do? What's it like working for a YC company?
Sure. So VELT, we create a toolkit that allows engineering teams to build collaborative features into their product. So if you
Hmm.
think about Google Docs or Figma or Miro, these are kind of like multiplayer apps. You can see other people who are on the same, what site as you at the same time. You can, see the little head bubble in the corner. You can maybe chat with them. You can see their mouse cursor as they move. Um, we have a theory that more and more websites, as they evolve, are going to become more more multiplayer, and
Hmm.
the engineering teams are going to, try to build these multiplayer experiences. It's difficult, um, but if they can leverage our toolkit, they can build it, in maybe less than a week.
Oh
So
wow,
we're betting
that's
on they're
great.
gonna, maybe pay us for our toolkit, build those features in a week, get their features launched to their customers instead of, spinning up a, 10% engineering team and trying to recreate Google Docs.
Yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree. That's exciting. And then what specifically do you do at the company for our viewers who are curious?
Yeah, so I'm a product manager on the team. I was the first product hire, and yeah,
Congrats.
th-
That's awesome,
thanks.
brother. So you're the first product hire, and then what do you do as a product manager?
Yeah, so I guess there's two buckets of what I do. The first is focusing on how can we get more people to figure out that we exist. So that's kind of like on
Mhm.
the growth side. And the other side is once they know we exist, how do we convert them into customers? So that's, just trying to figure out ways we can convert more of the visitors. So I focus on those two aspects.
Got it. And is your job heavily technical on the product side, or are you kind of more so on the business side of this role?
It's pretty technical because it is an SDK. A lot of our customers are engineers, so I'm on
Hmm.
calls with these engineers, doing demos, showing them how they can integrate it into their product. Um, and we have a documentation site, and for an SDK, the documentation is basically the UI because
Oh.
it's a bunch of code. So the only way you know how it works is kind of reading the documentation. So I actually maintain the documentation whenever there's
Oh
updates to the
wow.
SDK. I have to make sure that they get documented and written in a way that engineers can understand with a lot of examples.
That's pretty cool. And for viewers who are curious, can you explain you said two key terms there, SDK and UI. What is that?
SDK it's a software development kit. Um, it's basically a bunch of here's another jargon APIs
Go
that
ahead. You can explain APIs too if
exists
you
that
want.
you can use. Um, so an API is basically if someone has code and they want someone else to use the code, they need to package it in a way that other people can use it. So they put it, let's say, the cloud, and then um, people who want to use it can get access it and then run the code in an abstracted way.
Awesome, awesome. And then you mentioned something about the UI, the user interface. What
User
does it
interface.
yeah, where does it play a factor in the job?
Yeah, so if you work on any consumer product or a mobile app, there is like a UI there that you can click buttons, you can do things. But when the product is a bunch of code libraries, then the way you interact with these libraries is through documentation because you can figure out what exists, you can know how to write the code correctly so that you can tweak its parameters. Um, so the documentation is basically the UI for a kind of a SDK product.
That is pretty cool, and thank you for kind of giving the whole runaround explanation of all the technical terms. I appreciate it, right? Because sometimes I think half of the viewers I've realized are technical, half are non-technical, but they are interested in technology. So I appreciate you breaking it down in such a kind of straightforward way for our viewers. I want to ask another question about YC. So YC, Y Combinator, one of the best kind of accelerators in the Valley, in the Bay Area. Do you guys get to work specifically with like Gary Tan or Michael Seibel or any kind of these YC staff for just kind of consulting? How does it work?
Yeah, so the founder of the company did go through the YC program, and
Hmm.
I joined this company specifically because I wanted to see what the YC magic was.
Yeah,
So he has had meetings with Gary Tan. He told me like he had a meeting with Gary Tan. He went
that's
there
so
and he came
cool.
back and said, and the Gary Tan was like, you need to 10x your prices or it's not going to work. And then we added a zero and people kept paying. So I guess his
Wow.
advice did did make sense.
That's so cool. I actually watch a ton of Gary Tan on YouTube. Kind of he's like one of the reasons I got into YouTube just because I feel like I had a similar background to him growing up, like kind of first gen, trying to figure it out.
Mhm,
And then Michael Seibel, I watched a lot of Michael Seibel because I watched Justin Kahn, and I think they both built Twitch together. So I started
mhm.
kind of geeking out on them, and then there when during kind of like earlier, I guess during COVID, I was kind of like lost and like, should I get good at coding? So I started trying to email Michael Seibel if he'd like reach back out to me. Never emailed
Oh
back,
wow.
but I was like, oh, I feel like he'd say yes.
He's a busy guy.
He sounds like a busy guy, some random guy like emailing him. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Hey, I ask you another question. A last question about YC. For YC, most companies Are there end goals to go through an IPO or just kind of maintain, stay private and just really excel and grow the business?
Yeah, I think the main goal is to become that billion-dollar unicorn. There's a lot of pressure from the investors. They invest in hundreds of companies hoping that one becomes a billion, so the other 99 that fail. So if you kind of put on the brakes and you raise your first couple million to go to the seed round, but then you don't keep pushing to get the billion-dollar company, they'll like kind of ask, what are you doing? That's not the mission. Um, and at that point, when you first raise your, I guess your first round, you still have control of your company. Let's say you give up 20% to the VCs, you can still
Hmm.
do whatever you want. But it's
Yeah.
once you get to that series B and C where you've given up, more than 50% of the control to your investors, now they're gonna, push you, IPO or bust. So
Yeah.
um, you got to decide if that's for you.
That's fascinating. And I've seen people I've interviewed before, right? They talked about kind of going to the actual IPO and being there for Series A, B, C, D, E, like everything. And they said it is stressful when the investors you're working with are really pushing you to keep growing and growing the company. And then you're experiencing hyper growth where your headcount is growing tremendously. A whole bunch of new teams and divisions are being built out of nowhere. And that team where you just knew everyone, it's now global. So that is fascinating. And then for your company right now, for VELT, are you guys kind of Series A, B, C, seed round? What's
Yeah,
up?
we just raised a seed round, and we're actively trying to get to Series A. So
That's awesome. I feel like you have some great founders too, and then I know you're on the team. You're probably the first product person there too, so I know you're gonna do an amazing job. I'm excited to see how you grow the product side, man. You're one of the like smartest and most technical people I know, as well as you put in the work in the business side. So I'm so excited for you to have this opportunity to kind of grow it, and you have so many great product people who are friends with you, like Yuna, Tiff, who all work on the product side. So you have all these like big tech experience. You have your big tech experience, and I'm very excited to see where your career goes these next few years. And I fingers crossed for you guys IPO and you never work a day in your life, and you become like that house in Pack Heights. You know, you buy a couple houses there, man.
that would be cool,
uh,
Angelo. I'll invite you.
yeah, brother, count me in, man. I'll be the first one to buy you a bottle of wine, and we'll celebrate. I mean that. But yeah, Ben, this has been amazing. Like, thank you so much for teaching us everything about your experience. It's so I feel like your hyper growth, your career has been very inspiring. Getting to big tech so early on in your career, working at Netflix, working at Uber, seeing the hyper growth there, and then actually working at a YC company, and you get to be one the first product hire who gets to kind of build out the product side of the company. That is amazing. So I have one last final question for you, Ben. What is one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say for for my younger self, I would tell myself like think about the most amazing thing you can do, and then go do that.
That's amazing, bro. That's beautiful. Think about the most amazing thing you can do and go do that. And I think you have done that, my friend, right? Just shooting for the stars with Val, shooting for the stars with UCLA, and just building out your dream life and your dream career, man. I know for those of you curious, Ben's been grinding. He went to Gunn High School. That was one of the best high schools in the Bay. So I know Ben's built a little different since he came out of the Bay. Now he's back and he's throwing his hat in the startup game with VELT, with YC. And I'm so proud of you, my friend. Congratulations.
Thanks, Angelo. You're too kind.
Of course, my brother. Of course. Of course. With that being said, Jello family, I appreciate you guys watching the podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe. This will help grow the podcast, keep growing the channel. We're growing so fast, and I appreciate you so much. I'll add Ben's links in the bio below if you want to reach out to him. If you've been inspired by a story, just reach out, send him a thank you. And Ben's one of the most kind, generous guys I know, and one of the smartest business wise, technical wise people I know. So reach out to Ben if you have any questions. And appreciate you so much, Jello family. Have an amazing rest of your day. Peace.
Bye, everyone.